Hi, this is Nick Hodge with Outsider Club. Joining me once again is President, CEO, and Director of Midas Gold, Stephen Quin. Stephen, thanks for joining me again today.
Thank you for having me on, Nick.
Well, it's important that we had you back on. There's been three key pieces of news recently that I wanted you to highlight and give your take on. Most recently, yesterday, for which congratulations are due to you and the rest of your team. And what happened is the Idaho House of Representatives and the Idaho Senate, they passed what they call a joint memorial asking the president and select U.S. federal agencies to, in my words, hurry along or get this Stibnite project approved as fast as possible. Could you give me your take and tell me how this came about?
Sure. Yes, we've been working in Idaho since 2009, and spent a lot of time and effort, explaining the story of this project, which is that there is, yes, a substantial amount of economic benefit to come from the project, but that it is also a brownfield site that's seen a lot of historical disturbance related to prior mining before Midas was involved in the project. And that presents a sort of a rare and unique opportunity to clean up a historically disturbed mine site at the same time as creating that economic benefit. And so the result of that has sort of been a kind of a broader coalition of support for the project. And so we are particularly encouraged by this memorial, which is essentially a message from the state to the federal government saying, we're behind this project and we want to see it move forward, and we want to see it move forward, timely and cost effectively as possible through the process. But to say what we're particularly encouraged about is the cross-party support that we had the leadership of both parties, Republican, Democrat, sponsoring or co-sponsoring the memorial, and that got passed in the Senate yesterday, and we're very encouraged by that support. That it's a pretty rare and unusual event to have state government doing this kind of resolution and sending it to the President of the United States, Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary of Interior, and the Administrator of the EPA.
And well, it just goes to validate the strategy that you've taken. And it's, as I read it, not just the environmental remediation, which is obviously hugely important, but it's also the jobs that are going to be created, the investment that it's going to bring to the state. I read one of the quotes from one of the Idaho representatives, over $1 billion in investment if Stibnite goes forward. And then the strategic antimony credit, which is a supply critical mineral, as I understand it. And so you have this sort of threefold things that the state wants: the jobs, the investment, and the critical mineral. Is that correct, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this would be a very significant investment for Idaho, with approximately $1 billion in capital. That'd be about 500 direct jobs, about 500 indirect jobs during operation, just directly related to the operation, but quite a few more jobs across the broader state and across the U.S. You're buying equipment and supplies that are manufactured outside of the state. So this is a very significant project from an investment and job perspective, and it's also the pay in those jobs. The typical mining job in Idaho has an average wage of about $75,000 U.S., and whereas the the average wage in Idaho is about $35,000 U.S. So, you're talking well above the state average for employment. So these are not just jobs, but well-paid jobs, and obviously generate a significant amount of interest and for areas that obviously rural areas and so on, which don't have that many high-paid jobs. So that side of it is definitely important component to the project. And as you mentioned, the antimony side. The antimony is primarily used as a flame retardant and things you don't want to burn. So, key industries use it in the energy sector and the defense sector, because neither of them want things to burn and catch on fire. And so the U.S. is essentially dependent on China for its supply of antimony. And this site used to produce most of the antimony for the United States during the Second World War and Korean War, like upwards of 90% of it. But since then, China has been the dominant supplier, and so there's a strategic interest in ensuring the U.S. domestic energy and defense sectors have a domestic source of supply that's independent of China and other countries.
Well, congratulations again, Stephen. It's clearly validation of like I said, the strategy and the project, and we hope that Washington is receptive to the message of Idaho, and we look forward to the next comment period on your plan of restoration and operations, which I believe is due to be around the end of the year. You also had in the recent weeks an updated resource, and there is some important bullet points to hit there. I think the first of which is that it's the first time a measured resource has been defined at the Yellow Pine Pit. Can you explain sort of what that means in context of this new resource and what it would mean when the Stibnite project becomes a mine?
Certainly. So essentially, there's three categories of resource. There's inferred, indicated, and measured. And as you move from inferred to measured, you're increasing confidence. And measured is definitely the highest standard and the highest confidence level in that resource. And so it's the best defined area. And why that's significant in our project is that measured resource sits right below surface in the Yellow Pine pit area. And so it'll be the first area to be mined when we start production. And with an average grade of 2.5 grams a ton gold and 0.25% antimony, significantly above the average grade of the deposit. So not only do you have a high degree of confidence in it, it has very high grades, which gives you increased margin. And so that's obviously a significant positive. And overall, the Yellow Pine deposit saw about a 6% increase in grade for gold and about a 22% increase in antimony grade. And again, all that comes back to is margin. And a very simple way to think about it is if you have a $1,200 gold price and your all-in sustaining costs of $600 an ounce, which is roughly what ours are, and if you increase the gold grade by 6% because it costs you nothing extra to get that gold out, you'd have about a 12% increase in margin. Well, that applies across the entire first 6.5, 7 years of operation, plus the additional antimony. It's going to increase your margins, which will increase your present value and increase your rate of return on the project. So obviously those are positives. You want to see those gains early, and that's where we focused our drilling in 2016, 2017, was on the early part of the mine life where it would benefit the rate of return and present value of the project. And so we've been successful in doing that.
I'd say very successful. The development and the de-risking of the project is going very well, and there was also across the entire project 31% increase in the contained antimony, which is a mineral we've already discussed. So it seems things are going really well on the development front, and then we also got a metallurgical update. So not only do we have more confidence in this gold that's going to be mined early in the mine life, but according to the early metallurgical results that are out that are going to support the upcoming feasibility study, it seems like there's potential for higher recoveries and lower costs because of some changes that you've made to the grinding and also the amount of reagents you use. That was a very interesting press release to me. It seems like there was a lot of benefits and upside. Can you explain those?
Certainly. We did a lot of test work leading up to the pre-feasibility study that we published in 2014. But in that study, we identified a number of opportunities to optimize the performance of the metallurgical side of the equation, which is how do you get the gold out of the rock most economically. And so we've done an extensive program through a lot of 2017. In fact, starting in 2016 through 2017, and still bits and pieces still left to be done. But the real focus was on making a number of incremental improvements. Individually, do any one of them make a material difference? Perhaps not, but collectively, they make a significant difference to the economics of the project. So simply grinding the ore finer costs you more money. So obviously the reverse is true. If you don't have to grind as fine, you save money. You save energy costs, and you save the grinding media, the steel balls, to grind up the rock. So that saves you money. We get a higher concentrate grade when we float the product, and that just means there's less concentrate to process, which makes your equipment smaller and your costs lower. Getting higher recoveries, again, per my analogy, a few minutes ago, if you have more gold and more antimony in the material you're putting into the mill, and then you're able to get even more of that out than you were, it's just going to increase the margin on every ton of rock you put through that mill. So it'll have an economic benefit. And a flip side of it is, how you get the gold out is you use reagents, you use chemicals to recover the gold. And if you can use less of those reagents, that will reduce your operating costs. So you're always trying to optimize, and you want to add as little reagent as possible that gives you the most gold recovery possible. And that's the balance you're trying to get. And finally, the limestone side of things is an unusual one in that you essentially have to control pH, which is how acid is the solution that you're handling, and you want to manage again at that optimal level. And the pre-feasibility study assumed we used lime, and that lime has to be trucked in from off-site location, and it costs upwards of $300 a ton delivered to site. So it's expensive material. So again, you want to use as little as possible. Well, essentially, lime is just a refined form of limestone. And so we have a lot of limestone on site that we're mining anyway as waste rock out of the West End pit. And so we have free limestone. So would that work as well or similarly to brought in lime, and obviously significantly reduce costs? So we tested that, and we've taken it all the way to pilot level testing, which is as large as you do pre-actually building the mill. And those results were successful. But they also, switching to limestone, had some unanticipated incremental benefits as well. That we saw gold recovery go up a little bit and reagents go down a little bit. And so that you end up getting some additional economic benefits beyond just reducing the amount of lime. So obviously, there's a number of items there which are, say, individually relatively small, but collectively should provide a nice economic kick to the project through the results in combination. And when you take this with the fact you've also got higher grade gold and in the resource, obviously all of that should be very positive for the project.
I was just going to say, you're checking all the boxes. We've got an updated resource now with higher confidence in gold early in the mine life. As you said, the metallurgical report, it's a lot of small things that can potentially add up to something bigger. And as I understand it, that something bigger will potentially be revealed in a feasibility study. Are you still targeting later 2018 for that feasibility study when all this will be tied together?
Yeah, that's correct. So now that we've got all the kind of call it the input data from the project that we need, we now take all of that data and we take the resource and we start mine planning and looking to optimize, when does the highest margin material hit the mill. Obviously, we've got the mill data to sort of look at recoveries and how do we build that optimized mill recovery into that. And that all feeds into the operating cost for the operation. And then we start to look at the capital cost side of once we sort of optimize what this plant needs to look or run, how it will run, how big does it need to be and what's going to be the capital cost of those components. So we'll have all of that feed into a feasibility study. And there is one other additional thing which will help the feasibility study that we don't really mention here because it's nothing we did. With the tax changes in the U.S., the pre-feasibility study was done under the old tax regime, and the feasibility study will be done under the new U.S. tax regime, and that should provide, an additional kick to the economics of the projects in a positive sense, a boost to the project economics because the tax rate has gone down significantly.
That's something I hadn't considered. It's been a phenomenal week or two of news for Midas, Stephen. I wish you the best of luck headed into the feasibility study. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention today?
No, I just, I think this is a continual process of, de-risking the project, firming up the numbers, and making these incremental positive gains. And we just need to keep pushing that forward. And I think for the things that, if you want to put it this way, that we control, the feasibility study and everything going into that, I think we're really pushing forward well. Always the challenge is the regulatory side is not under our control. That's driven by the regulators, and that's why I think this memorial is important to kind of keep that pressure on and attention on the project to have it move forward in a timely basis, because it's not just the economic benefit to our shareholders, to the communities, but the longer we wait, the longer the cleanup of the environment has to wait as well. So there's kind of a triple win there waiting to be grabbed hold of as soon as we can move this project through the permitting process.
Well, I look forward to having you back on as you do that, and it seems like you might have a more favorable administration at this point for that permitting process that you don't control. So things moving in the right direction. Thanks, Stephen, for coming on. Hope to have you back soon.
Great. Thank you very much, Nick. Thanks for having us on.